السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا والحقنا بعبادك الصالحين. آمين آمين. There is lesson number 53 in our series of Islamic history. And at the moment, we're currently discussing some of the incidents mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah about previous nations, but we don't exactly know where they occurred. And from these incidents, three that we will mention today. The story of Jurayj al-Abid, Jurayj, the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the story of the woman and her child, and the story of the one who is famously known as Barseesa. So these three stories, inshallah, we'll mention them and we'll try and derive some benefits from them, inshallah. So inshallah we'll begin with the story first of Jurayj al-Abid. This incident here is mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim and in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. And inshallah we'll mention the narration of Bukhari and then the additions which were in the other narrations. It's a very brief story. However, the lessons are vast in the story. Jurayj, he is said to be a man from Bani Israel. And some say he was in the time period between Isa alayhi salam and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Allah knows best. Jurayj, he was a man from Bani Israel who was known for his worship. That's why he's known as Jurayj al-Abid. And he had a place of worship that he had built, and he would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that place of worship, in that ma'bad. And this continued for some time until one day Bani Israel were discussing amongst them Jurayj, and they were discussing his worship. Now there's two narrations, I mentioned both. The first narration says that a woman came and she was a prostitute. And she said that if you all speak about this man like this and you wish, I can entice him. Would you like to see that? So they said, entice him. It was like a challenge. They put forth a test for Jurayj. That's the first narration. The second narration says that Jurayj was praying in his place of worship and his mother called him. And then he asked himself, my salah or my mother? Should I continue in my salah or should I answer my mother? And this happened on three different occasions and it angered his mother. And his mother made the dua and she said, may Allah show you, may Allah test you with the fitna of seeing women who are, the word that she used was a mumisa, a woman not necessarily was a prostitute, but who indulges in these affairs of zina and illicit affairs. So she made this dua against him. She didn't make a dua specifically that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause him to be destroyed, but she made a dua that may Allah show him the faces of these women. Had she said, may Allah test him with these women or cause him to be destruction, maybe that would have been his end. However, she made this dua against her own child, and that's the two different narrations. As it goes after that, is that this woman thereafter, this woman who wanted to test Jurayj, this prostitute, or this woman who would engage in these acts from Bani Israel, she went and she tried to entice him and she was unable to do so. And thereafter she committed an act with a herd of some animals which was close to this area where Jurayj would worship. And she fell pregnant because of that. And when she gave birth, she went back to the people and she said, there is a child of Jurayj. She asked her, whose child? She said, the child of Jurayj. So she accused him of being the one who committed this action with her. Now, in one of the narrations, and this narration here, it's authentic in its chain, but nobody has narrated it from the books, the 6 books of Hadith, which are the authentic books, or which are known as the 6 authentic books of Hadith, or any of the other popular versions. But its chain is correct. It says that Bani Israel would kill its people, or its people, the people of Jurayj, if somebody were to commit the act of adultery, they would be executed for it. So they went to Jurayj and they broke his monastery and they pulled him out and they began cursing him and they hit him and they were preparing to kill him, to execute him. So he asked them to stop. And then he told them, take me to this child. So they took him to this child that they claimed to be his illegitimate son. And then he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and made salah and made dua. And then he went to this child and he poked the child in its belly. And he said, "Tell me who your father is." And the child answered Jurayj and he said that I am the son of the herder of the sheep. So he answered who he was. And then after they came back to Jurayj and they apologized and they said, "Let us build you a monastery. The part said we broke, we'll build it out of gold and silver." He said, "Return it to the way it was." There is a story that we know from the hadith. That's all that's mentioned. What happened after it, all of these things, we don't know. However, the story has many lessons. The first lesson that we can take from the story is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of all things. He is the one who has given us the ability to speak. He is the one who has given us the ability to speak. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummatikum la ta'lamuna shay'a." Allah has sent you forth from the bellies of your mothers and you knew nothing. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for you hearing and seeing and hearts understanding. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the ability to speak and the ability to comprehend. But little do we give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the same one who is capable of giving an adult the ability to do certain things is capable of giving a child who is not able to do those things in a natural or in a normal situation. Allah can make it possible. That is why this child spoke and he clarified the truth for them. That's the first benefit we can get. Inna Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. We must always remember this. Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of all things. And that is what you call husnu dhan billah, having a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any situation you're in, if you seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help and you believe that He is capable over all things and He is, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you. And that's why Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a hadith Qudsi, "Ana inda dhanni abdi bi." I am as my servant perceives me. That's the first thing. To know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable over all things and to have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that being said, that brings us to a second point that we can derive from the story. To have a good opinion of people. Jurayj, they knew him for so many years as being a worshipper. Immediately when this woman came and she made a false accusation against him, they went and they accused him of this, and even immediately they began exacting some type of punishment upon him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann inna ba'd adh-dhanni ithm." Oh, you who believe, stay away from lots of conjecture, types of what you think something about somebody. Verily, some of those types of dhann, of that conjecture, is actually a sin. And that brings us to the third benefit. To clarify information before we spread it. To make sure that we know the information correctly as it should be and not to hasten in judging people. And that is why you should listen from two parties. When you have something that occurs, information should be taken from both the parties. If some incident occurs involving two parties, information should be acquired from both parties before passing a judgment on people. And that's why in Islam there's a principle, there's a maxim that is used and is used now in all courts of the world. البينة على المدعي واليمين على من أنكر. That providing the proof is upon the one who accuses, and taking an oath to purify themselves is upon the one who has been accused. And there is a general common maxim used in all courts. You cannot accuse somebody and then expect them to provide a proof for their innocence. So she accused Jurayj of this action. Instead of accusing him and then taking it directly from her as it was, they should have went and consulted him from both parties. And that is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in a hadith, Ali ibn Abi Talib mentions that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told him, and Ali ibn Abi Talib is one of the greatest judges of Islam. He said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, إذا تقاضى إليك رجلان فلا تقضي للأول حتى تسمع كلام الآخر فسوف تدري كيف تقضي. If you are to judge, if two people come to you to judge between them, then do not pass judgment when you hear the speech or you hear what the first has to say, but listen to what the second has to say, because that is when you will know how to judge. And this was the same incident that we discussed in some detail in the story of Dawood alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Sad mentions about judging between two people. When you hear something, when an accusation is made against somebody, you need to go to that person to clarify, to verify, take both sides of the story. That's what we learn also. And that leads us to the third point. Who are they hearing this from? Who are they hearing this information from? They were hearing it from a woman who was known for committing acts of indecency, or even a prostitute in the other narration, which is Imam al Bukhari's narration. And then she was accusing somebody who was known for worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, أنزل الناس منازلهم. Put people on their correct stations. Don't just believe anybody. And especially if that person is known for transgression. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us in the Quran to verify information. And He said subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hujurat, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا. O you who believe, if somebody who is a transgressor, and we explained previously what is a transgressor, anybody who does obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala openly is a transgressor. They are not fit to lead the salah as the imam. Their testimony should not be taken in court. These are transgressors. Meaning anybody. Somebody smokes in public, transgressor. A woman doesn't wear the correct hijab, a transgressor. Her testimony is not accepted in court. And when I say proper hijab, we have a whole series of what is proper hijab. 3 or 4 lectures I spoke about what is proper hijab. Proper hijab means that which covers your beauty. Hijab, that's what it means, to cover. If you see the shape of a woman's body, it is not hijab. If the clothing is beautified in a manner that attracts the eyes of other people, that is not hijab. If a woman shows her face and she's wearing makeup to beautify herself, except that which was mentioned previously, and we mentioned the detail previously, that is not hijab. All of this is transgressions against Allah. So how about now this woman here was known for committing these acts of indecency? What happened? They believed her. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us as believers, the lesson is for us. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned this incident to us. Oh, you will believe. If a transgressor were to come to you, binaba, with any news, fatabayyanu, clarify, make sure. Don't just take the news and accept it and believe it. أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة, lest you may afflict a people with harm with your ignorance. Out of ignorance, you afflict them with harm. Why? You take that news, you carry it, you say this information. And if we were to apply this in our lives, it would make things go much easier. How many times you find people carrying tales about somebody, and as it goes along, the tale gets worse and worse. People add in more details which were not there. I heard and I heard. It was said and is hearsay. All of it is hearsay. So you find maybe a husband and wife had a fight and they separated for a while. And before you know it, when it reaches the end of the town, he's a wife beater, or she had an affair, or something, and you divorce them before they even got divorced. It happens. That's what it is. To clarify information, and then do not speak except with knowledge in that which concerns you. And that's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in another hadith, whoever believes in Allah in the last day, let him say good or remain silent. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah in the last day, indicating that this speech of goodness or silence when it does not concern you is from Iman. If you believe in Allah in the last day, say good or remain silent. So she came to them and this is what she said. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, clarify this information. Why? Lest you may harm a people by that. فَتُصْبِحُوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلْتُمْ نَادِمِينَ, and then you will become over what you have done regretful. Why? Either regretful in this world or in the year after. Allah will take you to task. And in the year after, events where people are oppressed in this world, the year after, the currency is hasanat. The currency is hasanat, good deeds. That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked the Sahaba, أَتَدْرِي مَنِ الْمُفْلِسِ? Do you all know who is the one who is bankrupt? The bankrupt person is somebody who had something before. He had good deeds in terms of the qiyam, on the day of Qiyamah. In this world, somebody who has money. They said the one who has no wealth. Man la dinar lahu wa la dirham. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said no. What is the muflis? What is the one who is bankrupt? It's a man who comes and he has lots of salah and zakat and fasting. وَقَدْ شَتَمَ هَذَا وَضَرَبَ هَذَا وَأَخَذَ مَالَ هَذَا he done all these things. وَسَفَكَ دَمَ هَذَا, he hit this one and he took this one's wealth and he cursed this person. And the same thing, you said something about somebody, that's from my words. You did all these actions. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioning a multitude of actions. You spilled the blood of someone, you took their wealth. Same thing. You made a statement, a false statement against somebody. All of it is inclusive. On the day of Qiyamah, so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, then their hasanat will be taken from them to pay their debt, to pay in retribution for what they said. And when their hasanat are finished, when their good deeds are finished, the evil deeds will be put on their scales. We don't want to be in that situation. There is a lesson from the story. They didn't believe. What did they do? They went immediately and they started avenging this woman. Why? Taking revenge upon Jurayj, or want to kill him. Had they killed him and this didn't reach us and the child didn't speak, on the day of Qiyamah, they would have been responsible because they didn't follow due process. And this is for all the nations before us and us. It is to take from both sides. We can't just listen to one side. The next point we can derive and benefit from this is not to take advantage of a situation where there is weakness. They may have been those in the society who were jealous of Jurayj. So they took advantage of the weakness of other people who got emotional when they heard this and they said, let's go now harm Jurayj because of what he has done, even though many of them may have known that he did not do it, or it's something that we need to clarify before that. And the next point we can benefit also from the story is that every single person will be tested and will be tried. Fitna must come to a person. We cannot be left without fitna. Allah will test us in this world, yeah. There is no doubt about it. Whether a person's test comes in terms of luxuries, as we mentioned previously, or test comes in terms of hardship. Test must come to every single person. The next thing is that if you look at the story in its entirety, there's one name mentioned in the story. The name of the person mentioned in the story is only Jurayj. The woman who committed this action, her name is not mentioned. The person who committed the act of adultery, the herder or the shepherd, is not mentioned. The people who went to harm Jurayj, they are not mentioned. The wealthy from Bani Israel in that time there, or the people of Jurayj, they are not mentioned. The famous, they are not mentioned. The powerful, they are not mentioned. The leaders, they are not mentioned. The king is not mentioned. None of them are mentioned. The one who worships Allah, the one who is from Al-Muttaqun, the ones who are from Al-Muttaqeen, the ones who have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ending is for them. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves the legacy of a person alive amongst people in goodness, it is an indication of acceptance of this person. Imagine how many hundreds of years later are we reading the story here and drawing benefits? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned the incident to us and we're drawing benefits. Allah kept the story alive through His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We also should aspire to be from amongst those who will do deeds in this world so that Allah will keep our remembrance alive amongst people so that when people read about us or hear about us, they ask Allah forgiveness for us. And that our athar, our remnants remain for people so that we are like guiding lights. Look at this incident here. The man was a worshipper. What did he do? What did he do? Here's the next benefit. When they accused him, the first thing he done was he sought help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately. He sought help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately. He didn't seek help from anybody else. From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately. He went and he read salah. And he after that prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then he carried out the action. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. The one who puts his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is enough for that person. And وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. And the one who has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah makes a way out for him. To take from those things in the world which are allowed, meaning al-asbab, what Allah has put in our own possession, in our own power, that we use them to better our position in this world, there is no problem. But all of it is contingent upon that which is wajib, to have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to seek help from Him first. And that's why in the Quran, the last ayah of Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَقُل, say, hasbi Allah. Say, hasbi Allah. Allah is enough for me. La ilaha illahu alayhi tawakkal. There is no God but Him. Upon Him I have tawakkalt. I have tawakkul. And He is the Lord of the great throne. So to ask help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before anybody else, that is what a believer does. And the last point we'll mention here, or we can mention actually two more points, is that people are upon their exterior actions. We don't know what the hearts contain. We don't know what the hearts contain. People are judged according to what they do on the outside. Jurayj was a worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They should have judged him in an affair which was unseen. They didn't see this occurring by how they had seen him, but they jumped to conclusions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who knows the hearts. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. Allah knows the deceptions of the eyes and what the hearts conceal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Do not give credence to yourselves. Allah is more knowledgeable of those who have taqwa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, or Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the hadith, speaking about that which is haram and that which is halal and what is in between, The one who leaves that which is in between, فَقَدْ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ وَعِرْضِهِ. If you leave that which is in between halal and haram, you don't fall into that, then you are protecting yourself, your religion, and your ird, and your dignity. So also all of us, we should remember to protect our dignity. And this is done how? If anything comes upon us in terms of something which is doubtful, stay away from it. The way he stayed away from this woman when she came to entice him, he stayed away. Had he listened to her and tried to convince her and spoken to her, they would have accused him even more. Why they said, "We seen you, this woman. We saw you talking to her." He stayed away from her until she could not entice him, and she had to go and claim all of these false things. And the last false accusations, the last thing is the dua of the parents. 3 du'as. And there's a hadith when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, ثلاث دعوات مستجابات لا شك فيهن. There are 3 du'as where they are accepted, there is no doubt in it. The first, دعوة الوالد على ولده. The dua of a father upon his son, not for his son, upon his son, meaning the father or the mother. And this is in terms of the child who is disobedient, the child who has done something against the parents. And that is why his mother, she made the dua. Now I'm deriving this. His mother didn't make the dua because he did an act of disobedience. She made the dua, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to see the fitna in his life. He saw the fitna in his life. The fitna came, he refused the fitna, he passed that test. Where did the fitna come back again? That same test emanated one more time when she accused him. And this woman accused him of this action and she came with a child because of the dua of the mother. Do not make dua against your own children. That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam even said in another hadith, لا تدعوا على أنفسكم ولا تدعوا على أولادكم. Do not pray upon yourselves. Don't pray upon yourself for destruction. Meaning not for yourself, not upon yourself. You pray against yourself or against your children. Don't do that. And this happens sometimes with parents. And there's poor parenting. May Allah save us. A child is being disobedient or tells you something or does something that you dislike. So you make a dua against him not knowing. You tell them, Allah will show you one day when you have children. Why are you making dua against your own children? Rather take that opportunity of anger to make a dua for them, not against them. Sometimes people make dua against their own children not to have children. Then when they don't have children, what happens? What happens? There is exactly what we need to understand. Don't make dua against your children. There is an incident, I don't know how authentic it is, but I've heard it from many people. And it's something we know because it's very close to our time and to home. We all know the famous Imam of the Haram, Abdul Rahman as-Sudais. There's a famous incident that they say he mentions. Allahu Alam, I didn't hear it from him, but it's not far away of something like this occurring. I heard it from others. And he says that when I was young and I would trouble my mother would tell me, "You're troubling me. May Allah guide you and make you the Imam of the Haram." And look how it was. He became the Imam of the Haram. And not only any Imam of the Haram, the most famous Imam of the Haram. I think so. In modern time, he is the most famous Imam of the Haram. Maybe he's the most famous reciter of the Quran in modern time. The bottom line is, make dua for your children. Don't make dua against them. That's the first story, the story of Jurayj al-Abid. The next 2 stories are much shorter, and inshallah the lessons are also applicable. The next story within this hadith is also speaking about those who spoke in the cradle when they were young. Like Jurayj went and he spoke their child and the child spoke. The next story is a story about somebody else who spoke in the cradle. The third is obviously Isa alayhi salam, who we know, who spoke when he was young, where his mother, فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ, Allah said in Surah Maryam, and she indicated to him, what did he say? قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ, verily I'm the servant of Allah, آتَانِيَ الْكِتَابِ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions what Isa alayhi salam said to his people. That we know is mentioned and is famous, and also in this hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned Isa alayhi salam. From the next story is a story of a woman who was breastfeeding a child, and this is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. And while she was breastfeeding a child, she saw a man pass by, and this man had on him what they call wisam, or he had shara. Shara means beauty. He was a handsome man. He had features which were handsome. And when she saw this man with this handsome look and how he looked, and she made dua for her child. And she said, Allahumma ja'al ibni mithla hada. Oh Allah, make my son like this one. And the son was suckling, a breastfeeding baby. And Abu Hurairah says, it is as if I see Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam doing what the baby done. Meaning Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was showing what the baby done in terms of suckling. He left suckling his mother and he made the dua and he said, Allahumma la taj'alni mithla hada. He said, oh Allah, do not make me like this person, mithlahu. Allah, do not make me like him. So This man here who was on his ride and he came and he was handsome, the child made dua, opposite to the dua of his mother. And then some time went and they passed a woman. And this woman was a slave girl who was being beaten. And the mother made a dua, oh Allah, do not make my son like this woman. And then the son stopped suckling again. And he said to his mother, making a dua, oh Allah, make me like this woman. So the mother, when she heard this, imagine your own child speaking. You see this man, and then he passes, and then you come across another scenario which you dislike, and you make a dua, your child replies to you. A suckling baby who cannot speak. So when this woman heard this, obviously something shocking. She spoke back to the child. She said, I made this dua for you and you say the opposite. And I made this dua for you and you say the opposite. I made dua for you in goodness and you say the opposite. And I made dua for you to save you from evil and you say the opposite. The child said, Ya Ummah, oh my mother. Now, we hear this sometimes and we don't want to believe things. It's far-fetched. The child speaking. There is no hadith. We have to believe this. There is no doubt about this happening. This is mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim. In the Muslim of Imam Ahmad. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam narrated this to us. He said, as for the man who passed, in one of the narrations, he's a jabbar, oppressor. In another narration, he was a kafir, it says. And it can be both. As for the man who passed and you saw him, this man here was an oppressor and a disbeliever. And as for the woman who you saw, and they say that she committed adultery, so they were punishing her, and she stole, so they were punishing her, she was a believer. And when they accused her, she said, Hasbi Allah, Allah is enough for me. And when they accused her again of stealing, she said, Hasbi Allah, Allah is enough for me. So there's the incident. What can we benefit from this incident here? There's all this mentioned about the incident. Here the benefits are very similar to the previous story, but we'll mention those which are directly linked to it. Firstly, we should not judge a person by their exterior in terms of what their will or weight will be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah knows what is in the heart. So a person's poverty and difficulty and appearance are not indicative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wrath or anger upon that person. And a person's wealth and beauty and status is not indicative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure being upon that person. We don't know what is in the heart. We don't know the taqwa in the heart. Hence, we don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees on those people. So a person can be wealthy, he can be handsome, he can be all these things. We don't know whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure is upon that person, hence he has bestowed him those things or not. And the opposite is the same. We don't know these things. So none of us should judge a person by those actions which we see manifesting themselves, or those things we see manifesting themselves upon that person. If a person is poor and in difficulty and is going through a hard time and calamity over calamity, we can't make the claim that this person is being punished for certain things that he did. Let alone make a claim that the bounties of Allah upon us are an indication of Allah's pleasure upon us. What is actually true is that if Allah loves a people, He tests them. Inna Allah, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, if Allah loves a servant, He tests him. Something to that effect. That person is tested and tried. So there's no way to know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, telling us that our tribes and our people and our ethnicities and all of these things which sometimes we take pride in. We take pride in it. Allah says that the litmus test is not that. The litmus test is not the color of our skin or otherwise. It is taqwa. Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakari wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uba wa qabaila lita'arafu. Inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum. O mankind, verily I have created you from a male and a female. We're all the same, from one male and one female. And I made you peoples and tribes. Allah made us peoples, different peoples. Whether your nationality or your ethnicity is not indicative of superiority over somebody else. If you are black or white or Indian or red or brown or whatever it is, the more fairer your skin is doesn't mean you're better. Doesn't mean you have superior intellect. Doesn't mean anything. If you come from a certain people, it doesn't mean anything. Or a certain tribe, it doesn't mean anything. What is meaningful? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors a person, the most honored amongst you in the sight of Allah is the ones who have taqwa. And that is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in another hadith, Man batta bihi amaluhu lam yusri' bihi nasabu. Whoever's actions hold him back, his lineage will not put him forth. So we don't know how to judge people in terms of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees from them. That's not our job. Same what happened here in this situation. It is not indicative of Allah's mercy or anger upon a person from their situation. That doesn't indicate Allah's pleasure upon them or His anger upon them. And that is why we need to go back to the heart. None of us can see the heart. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, At-taqwa ha huna, at-taqwa ha huna. He said, taqwa is here, indicating to his heart, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The heart is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. The second benefit we can take from this is Allah knows what is better for us than our own selves. This woman here made a dua for her child, which was not good for the child. Because why? She thought that wealth and beauty and status is better for a child than other than that. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And there may be something that you dislike and it is better for you. And Allah says, and there may be something that you like. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. There may be something that you love and you desire and it is worse for you. And how many a times a person desires something and when that desire is fulfilled, he realizes or she realizes that that desire brought only more misery to their lives or more difficulty. And how many a times a person would desire something and then it is manifested to them in the future, had they obtained that, they would have been in a situation of misery. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what is better for us. So here also, Allah knows in our own lives if wealth is better for us or poverty is better for us, if health is better for us or sickness is better for us, in all situations, as is manifested in the story of the child. Thirdly, no harm comes to a person except that harm there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses it to expiate sins. This woman here was being punished and she was saying, Hasbi Allah, Allah is enough for me. Even if we don't know her name, even if she went on and she was killed by punishment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expiates our sins if we go through any difficulty in this world. That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in the hadith, La yusibbul mu'min. And then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned many things, and from them is other, any harm. Illa kaffar Allah bi khataya. Except Allah through those difficulties, those harms, even the prick of a thorn, Allah expiates for that person their sins. The next benefit is shahadat al-zuhr, to give false witness over somebody. This woman here was being punished for something and she was saying Allah is enough. And the same thing in the story of Jurayj. False witness is something which is abhorrent and it is from the major sins. And in one of the ahadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned to them and he said, should I not tell you about the greatest sin, the greatest sin? And then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned Allah wa shahadat zur. He mentioned shahadat zur and he said, no, it is shahadat zur. The greatest sin is false testimony against somebody. And that false testimony, if it leads to that person's destruction or difficulty upon that person, we are liable. We are liable for false testimony. And the last one is that a believer, Allah categorizes and He describes the believers as those who have sabr, who have patience, who have tolerance, who have the ability to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before all things. Look at this woman who was being punished. She was tolerant. And then she said the words going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Hasbi Allah, Allah is enough for me. The third story, inshallah, we'll be taking today, and there's our last story, is the story of Barseesa. Barseesa is also a man who was mentioned from Bani Israel. And Barseesa, like Jurayj, is tested. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested Barseesa and it led him to his destruction. And Allah tested Jurayj and saved him. May Allah make us from those when they are tested are not misguided by those tests. Because all of us will be tested. All of us will be tested. That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned in a hadith also that verily it has come down to me. It has been revealed to me that you will be tested in your graves like a test close to the test of الدجال. قد أوحى إلي أنكم تفتنون في القبور قريبا من فتنة الدجال. Verily it has been revealed to me that you all will be tested, that you will be tested in your grave, a test which is close to the test of الدجال. So all of us must be tested in this world and in the grave. That test is coming. Barseesa, what is his story? He was a abid, also a worshipper from Bani Israel. And Barseesa, he had, just like Jurayj, a place that he worshipped. And some narrations say he worshipped Allah for 60 or 70 years. And he was known to his people for his excessive worship. There were 4 young men in the time of Barseesa in this place that he was. These 4 young men, they had a sister. And they wanted to go out for jihad. So they thought, now who can we entrust the safety of our sister to? We can't leave a woman alone. We need to entrust her safety to somebody. And none other than Barseesa came to their minds. So when he came to their minds, they said, we will go to him and we will ask him to look after our sister in our absence. So they went to him and he asked. He initially refused. He said, no, I won't. Until they insisted. And they said, we want to go out for jihad. There is nothing. Just look after. We will provide everything for you. All you have to do is just give her food, and that people know that this woman is protected by Barseesa. There is a man there who is taking care of her. Otherwise, they may take advantage of this woman when her protectors, the brothers, are gone. So Barseesa agreed, and then he said, not in my place of worship, in an area close to that, in a house or dwelling close to the place of worship. So she remained there, and Barseesa then would prepare food every day and give it to her. He saw this as an act of what? Helping somebody else. And this continued for a time. Now, here, there's something to mention in the story, and I'll mention it also in the benefits. This is what you call istidraj. Shaitan comes in many forms. Look how Shaitan, concentrate how he comes to Barseesa. This continued for a certain time until Shaitan came to Barseesa. Like I said, there's many narrations of exactly the order of what happened. Shaitan came and he whispered, and there's the whispering of Shaitan. Al-Khannas. Allah mentions Shaitan as being Al-Khannas, the one who continually comes to you, returns. He came to Barseesa and he said, you leave the food at the door and then you knock on the door and you leave. How do you know that she is getting that food? How do you know a situation if it is sufficient for? Maybe an animal comes and eats some of that food. Maybe that food gets, she's not there to answer immediately. How do you know? Wait for her to open and then give her the food. So Barseesa thought about this. Shaitan didn't come in a form of a man and say, these are whispers of Shaitan, and all of them. So he did that. Slowly, slowly, this is how Shaitan takes you. He went and he began now waiting for, and then he would hand the food over. So from being somebody who didn't have any contact with her, he would knock on the door, leave the food. He didn't see her, she didn't see him, nothing. Now he gets contact. The first contact is what? He sees her now. He hands the food over. And this continued for a certain time until Shaitan came back to him. And he said that this woman here, she is alone. You go and you hand food over to her, you don't speak to her, she doesn't speak to you. Ask her, greet her, and ask her how is the situation. Maybe she requires something, but because you don't speak to her and she doesn't speak to you, she can't, and she has no other body, no other protector. So Barseesa thereafter went, and then he would ask her daily, how are you? Is there anything you need? And she would speak back to him, and this conversation would occur. Then Shaitan came to him, and he told him, he whispered to him, he said, people will see you speaking to this woman. Look at how he comes. Look at the different ways. Tafannun, there's what you call, he had skill in this. And they see you speaking, and they say, Barseesa, this worshipper, look at him sitting and talking to a woman. Go inside the house and sit with her and ask her how she's feeling, if she needs anything. So he began doing this. And then some time passed and Shaitan came back to him. And he told him, you are a man who, for you this life, you have become accustomed to this type of lifestyle where you don't have anybody. You're just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so many years. This woman, you just go in very bluntly, ask her, do you need anything? Are you fine? Are things okay? And you take that and there's no conversation. Go and have a conversation with her and give her some solace. She is alone. She has nobody. She knows no one. Be that person who will be there for her. How can you just leave her? She's not accustomed to this life. So Barseesa went now and then and he would do that. Until eventually what happened? Eventually this whole step by step led to him committing the act of adultery with her. And she bore a child and she gave birth to that child. This we said is called istidraj. Slowly, slowly Shaitan waits for you and he takes you one step to another. And that's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in the hadith, لا يخلو الرجل بالمرأة. A man is not alone with a woman. إلا الشيطان ثالثهما. Except Shaitan, or كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, except Shaitan is a third of them. Shaitan is a third. He is there with them. So this led thereafter to him committing adultery. And there is a brief version. There may have been other things that happened on the way until she had a child. When she had a child, what happened to Barseesa? Now we thought, if the brothers come back and they see that she has a child, they'll kill me because why? They'll say, we left our sister in charge with you and you did the thing that we feared. You took advantage of her. So Shaitan came to him and he said, kill her. Kill the child. So they don't know. Don't leave evidence. So he went and he killed the child. And then Shaitan came to him back after a time and he said, do you think that she will remain silent upon this crime that you've committed? Kill her. So he killed her and he buried them in the same grave. The same place where he buried the child, he buried her. And when the brothers came back, he told them, your sister fell ill and she died and I buried her. Here's the grave. Shaitan then came into the brothers. And he came to them all in one night in their dreams. Shaitan comes to a believer in his dreams. He can come. That's why you read the dua before you sleep, so Allah protects you. And he showed them in their dream the grave of their sister or their child, and he showed them the incident that Barseesa did this to your sister. Now, obviously, a dream is something you see, it's not true. So when they awoke, one of them said to his brothers, I saw a strange thing. I do not know whether I should say it or not. A strange, a troubling dream. So they told him, say. So when he said it, all of the others began saying, Wallahi, we saw the same thing. There's something in this affair. So they went to him and they confronted him. He didn't give up. So they dug the grave up and they found the sister. They found a body of their sister, and they found a body of a baby. So they went and they asked him again. He admitted. So they took him to the king. When he went to the king, he admitted, and then they ordered that he be imprisoned and executed. At that time, Shaitan came to him and he said, do you know the situation you find yourself in? In man form, in human form, I am the one who put you in a situation. And if you want to leave the situation and be free from it, I am the one who can remove you from the situation. Make sajda to me. Put your head on the ground for me, and I will take you out of the situation. Barseesa did that, and he made sajda for Shaitan, and then Shaitan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, he said, I'm free from you. And he was executed and killed. He was put to test, and he was tested, and he failed the test. كَمَثَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِذْ قَالَ لِلْإِنسَانِ كْفُرْ. And there is the example Allah puts forth for us in Surah Al-Hadid, ayahs number 16 and 17. This is the example Allah puts forth of Satan. He says to man, Ukfur, disbelieve in Allah. And when the person says, فَلَمَّا كَفَرَ قَالَ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّنْكَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. When that person disbelieves, Shaitan says, verily I am bari, I am free from you, I am innocent from you. Verily I fear Allah, the Lord of the worlds. There is Shaitan. Let us not be tricked and tested by Shaitan in this way here. So there is a story of Barseesa. Inshallah, before we mention the benefits, these three stories here, they are common stories and their benefits are similar, and we can inshallah derive what is remaining of the benefits from the last story. The previous two stories mentioned a miracle which occurred, which was a miracle of a child speaking in the cradle. The others who spoke in infancy, we said was Isa alayhi salam, and the one who spoke to clarify the accusation against Jurayj al-Abid, and the one we mentioned in Surah Buruj, the companions of the ditch, the child who told his mother that, Ya Ummah, we are on the truth. Oh, my mother, we are on the truth. So go jump into the ditch. There's others who are mentioned also, but these three are known. These three are known. In another narration, it says, and I mentioned this in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, that the one, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا, Allah says in Surah Yusuf, and a witness from her family came forth, from the family of the wife of the Aziz for Yusuf alayhi salam. They say there was also a child in infancy. We mentioned the details of that in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. The other one that's mentioned is similar to the companion of the ditch. And they say that this incident happened to what they call Mashitatu bint Fir'aun. We mentioned in the companions of the ditch that this incident of these ditches being dug and people being thrown in happened a multitude of times in history, and one of them was with the pharaohs and with Nebuchadnezzar, we said specifically that pharaoh. However, there's a story that's mentioned about a woman in the time of Musa alayhi salam who used to be the one who used to comb the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun. Right now, here also, the daughter of Fir'aun, when we were mentioning it, he had no children. All of these incidents I'm mentioning now afterwards, these incidents here, there is no definity in them. I'm just mentioning them, so if you hear them, you know. It said that she was combing the hair of this girl, and she dropped the comb, and when she picked it up, she said, Bismillah, and she began again. So the girl said, I will tell my father what you said. So when she went to Pharaoh, her father, and she informed him, he took this woman and he asked, who is your Lord? She said, Allah is my Lord and your Lord. So he thereafter got a pit for her. Or they say it was in the form of a cow or a big pot. And fuel was put into that pot or that cow, and it was made hot. And thereafter, her children were thrown in one by one, and she was thrown in with the last one. And the last one, when she hesitated with the baby to be thrown in, they say that this is the incident which is being referred to from Surah Al-Buruj. Like I said, there's many incidences, but the ones which we know are authentic is this one you mentioned in the hadith, the incident of Jurayj al-Abid, and the incident mentioned in Surah Al-Buruj, but we don't know exactly what's the story. If this is the story or the other story that's mentioned, the story we know which is authentic is the one we narrated from the companions of the ditch. These stories, yeah, are they authentic? Are they speaking about the same thing? Allah knows best. The last story we mentioned now is the story of Barseesa. What can we benefit from it very briefly? Firstly, we should know that al-aqdar bayna yaday outcomes are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. None of us knows whether he will be going to paradise or to hellfire. None of us knows what will occur with him on the morrow. That's why we should ask protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from fitan, from trials and tribulations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests a people. And there's no doubt about that. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith, إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الجنة فيختم له بعمل أهل النار. A man will do actions of the people of paradise, but his ending will be that of the people of the fire. And we mentioned about the man who does the actions of the people of paradise until there is between him and paradise only an arm's length. And then qadar overtakes him, predestination overtakes him, and then he begins doing the actions of the people of hellfire until he enters hellfire. And the opposite is true as well. And that is why we should be careful and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us steadfast and guide us to the straight path and save us from fitna. And also, the next benefit, do not be cheated by shaitan. Do not be cheated by shaitan in this world. فَلَا تَغُرَّنَّكُمُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا وَلَا يَغُرَّنَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغَرُورِ. Allah says in the Quran, do not be deceived by the deception of this world, and do not be deceived by the deceivers. Who's the deceiver? Shaitan. Let us not be deceived by doing something and saying it's okay. I'll just do a little bit. I only do this. I don't do other things. This istidraj leads to the fire. And this comes to the next benefit. The benefit of what is known as sadd al-dhari'ah. In the Sharia, there is a principle in usul al-fiqh, which is known as sadd al-dhari'ah. Sadd means to place a barrier between something. Dhari'ah is that which leads to something. And specifically, in this context, it means that which leads to transgression or sin or to evil. In the Sharia, there's a concept known as saddu dhari'ah, blocking this type of actions which lead to sin. Not actually sin, but they lead to sin. Example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Do not go close to adultery. Adultery is a thing which dictates punishment, which punishment should be placed upon. Adultery is that which is action which is wrong. Allah says, don't go to adultery. Don't find yourself alone with another woman. Don't speak to a foreign woman unnecessarily. Don't do actions which may open the door for a relationship and then eventually lead to adultery, like we see in the story here. Also, saddu dhari'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in many places in the Quran to indicate to us what may occur if we were to fall into these things. It would lead to haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, speaking about women, وَلَا يَضْرِبْنَ بِأَرْجُلِهِنَّ لِيُعْلَمَ مَا يُخْفِينَ مِنْ زِينَتِهِنَّ. They should not stamp their feet so that it is known what they conceal of their adornments. Meaning, if you walk here and you have a bangle on your foot, like a woman would wear these bangles, and it makes a sound, anklets. It makes a sound. Allah even prohibits a woman from walking in a way that the sound here would attract a man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not beautify your voices, but and speak to them in tones that the one who has a sickness in his heart, what does he do? The one who has a sickness in his heart may have a different perception of it. All of these things are from saddu dhari'ah. The actual speaking in that way is not haram. The actual walking in that way is not haram. What it leads to is haram, so it has been made haram. That is established in the Sharia. So also those actions which may lead to something worse can be made haram in the Sharia by a fatwa. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it when the munafiqun were saying things about Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they were harming the Muslims. The Sahaba told Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why don't we kill them? Kill the munafiqin. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it should not be said that Muhammad killed his companions. Why? That action of killing them, even though it's not wrong, you can kill them. If you were to do it, it would lead to people saying Muhammad killed his companions, and hence it would cause them to leave Islam or go away from Islam. They would not come to Islam. So saddu dhari'ah is something known in the Sharia. That something doesn't need to be haram with a text. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said this, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it's haram with a text. It can be made haram through this action, unless otherwise there is a maslaha, there is a benefit which it contradicts. If it contradicts a benefit and it's both sides of the coin, then you need a mufti to look at, or somebody of knowledge to look at it, the person who legislates to look at it, and they will decide whether something is allowed or not. For example, just to make it clear, in the Sharia also this exists. A woman's face, to look at a woman is haram. You can't look at a woman. You're not allowed to look at it. It's known as zina of the eyes, right? So why? There is known as zina of the eyes. But when can you look at the one? When is there a maslaha? When there is a when is there a benefit which overpowers this dhari'ah, which overpowers this action which would lead to wrong? When you go propose to a woman, proposing to a woman would lead to what? To marriage, to protecting yourselves. But if you now can't see the woman, it would make it difficult to get married. So the maslaha, the benefit of seeing a woman in that situation overrides the mafsada, overrides the evil of what? Of looking at a woman. So it is allowed in the Sharia. So the same thing, I'm giving examples which are known in the Sharia to all of us. There are other fatwa, there are other ahkam, other laws which have been implemented the same way. And the most famous of them in recent times, whether it's right or wrong, whether the mafsada was more, or the maslaha was more, whether the dhari'ah was more or the maslaha, whether the evil that it led to would have been more or the benefit that it would lead to would be more. We're not looking at it. We're just looking at the fatwa, the example, so we all understand. The most famous of them in our time is the law of driving, woman driving in Saudi Arabia. It's based on this principle. That's how the fatwa was given. And Allah knows best. So that's the next benefit we can take from this. The next benefit also, we can take another benefit which is common throughout all the stories, is that a believer must be tested. We must be tested always. And continually we speak about this. The test must come. We must be ready for the test. You can't prepare for it when the test comes. You must inculcate certain habits in yourself which allow you to take on the test when it arrives. Also, we benefit, as is mentioned in the story, al-istidraj. Shaitan doesn't come to you directly. If shaitan want to come to people directly and tell them disbelief, people will not disbelieve. Commit zina, people will commit zina. But shaitan places those temptations in your way which you see as minuscule. So you go from something small and eventually it grows until you enter into al-kabair, the major sins. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattabi'u khutuwat shaitan. Allah says, oh, you believe, do not follow in the footsteps of shaitan. And Allah subhanahu and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like we said, he mentioned in the hadith, that a man and woman are not together except shaitan is their third. Meaning what? That don't put yourself in a situation which is precarious or a situation which may lead to something which is haram. Always look at what is the safest situation for myself. I put myself there. I practice the strictest strand of Islam upon myself. I do not need anybody's affirmation or anybody's criticism to turn me away from what is correct. If it is correct, you practice the strictest form of Islam upon yourself if you know you cannot tolerate. And that brings us to the next point. A person should only help people or should only indulge in that which he is able to tolerate in terms of fitna or otherwise. Don't do something that will cause you to fall into fitna, into trial and tribulation, and then you cannot bear it. Always look at what you are able to bear. The next point is that true success and truly being saved from something can only occur when somebody has knowledge. Ignorance leads to haram. Ignorance leads to destruction. This man here, Barseesa, his ignorance at the end by putting his head on the ground for shaitan is an act of ignorance. He would have known that if shaitan caused him to fall into this, then to put his head on the ground now for shaitan is even worse. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person with knowledge knows that. That doesn't matter what you do, as long as you don't commit shirk, as long as you are alive, you can ask Allah for forgiveness. Don't go what they call at-tamadi fil batil. Don't go deeper into the falsehood. So, ar-ruju' ila Allah awla. To return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes preference over despondence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. And the last thing is that everybody will be tested. All these stories. Everything that comes to us, we must understand that the same way we are alone on the day of Qiyamah, when we are tested, we are alone in this world. Nobody can help you besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same way, if a person is doing something in accordance to Islam, and thereafter he is mocked for it, or is told that he is radical for it, or you need to give so-and-so a break, you give your children a break, or give your spouse a break, there's not the way to do things. If it is in accordance with the Sharia, then don't look to what people are saying, whether they are criticizing you, whether they are mocking you, whether somebody is praising you for what you do. You need to do what is right by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as you are on the day of Qiyamah alone, when you get into problems, people leave you alone. يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغني. If you are alone in this world practicing Islam, remember that you don't need to conform to people. You also alone are going to come on the day of Qiyamah. On that day, a man will run from his brother, and from his mother and his father, and from his wife, his spouse, and from his children. On that day, every individual will have that which is buzzing them. لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغني. They will have affair which will make them busy. Not your mother, not your father, not your children that you love, or your spouse that you love, or anything on that day will be able to come and ask you for anyone. You will say what? Nafsi, nafsi, myself, myself. So even in this world, if you're alone practicing Islam, if you're alone doing something, people want to make a mockery of you, they want to call you by names, they want to laugh about it, whatever they call you. They want to say you are a strict person and you too stringent and you are fundamentalist, what it may be. As long as it is in accordance with the Sharia, if you are doing correct by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tell them I can be alone in this world, and on the day of Qiyamah, I'll be alone also. So I'm not worried. And that is why Shaitan, what does he tell? This ayah that you said, some people say it's a commentary of this ayah in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hadid, ayahs number 16 and 17. كَمَثَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِذْ قَالَ لِلْإِنسَانِ كْفُرْ. It is like Shaitan when he tells man, disbelief. فَلَمَّا كَفَرَ قَالَ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّنْكَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. So when man disbelieves, he says what? I am free from you. I am innocent from what you have done. I fear Allah, the Lord of the worlds. There is a reality of the situation. Everything needs to be done in accordance. Don't worry about what people say. Remember, fitna will come and you need to prepare for the fitna now before it comes. Remember that shaitan is the one who comes to you and whispers in your ears to do those things which are wrong. Allah has put for us a blueprint, a way that we can have success. We need to follow that. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.